All right, Mopar people, welcome back to the channel. I'm JustMoparJoe. It's time to set the rockers up on the 508 Street Stroker using 440 source rockers. So before we get started, I know I've mentioned before, I've ordered new shafts for these. My shafts are coming from Harland Sharp directly. I talked to Mr. Randy Jr. and got a set coming for that. But before I get those here, I wanted to get one side set up and just kind of video how to my process of doing this. I did show this a similar deal on my 406 that is in my Barracuda, but I wanted to kind of show you how I revised it just a little bit. Step one, so we know that we're oiling. See our little holes here. There's only two main veins that come up from the block to fill that shaft. So if I take my 440 source shaft, which 440 source wants holes on top and bottom. Let me show you that. You can see all the way through it. There's my finger on the other side, just so you'll know. And they're parallel with the mounting holes here. But if you look down through there, you can still see that oiling hole. So if that hole was really, really tight for some reason, if there's a bevel here, just like that, it should still oil that plenty fine. There's a lot of space. I'll actually grab a bolt. So they include bolts with their kit. And yes, that bolt would go here. But if that bolt's screwed in, you can see I have play that way and play that way. So not a big deal. They give you a lot of room there. And their hold downs will actually clamp that. So moving forward, I'm going to use studs everywhere I can. We got the Trick Flow rocker stud Big Block Mopar kit, and they give you, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 studs, but they're all the same length. So not going to work well for us on this, on these Indy heads, or they'll work fine. I just can't use them everywhere. You'll see that one will end up being a little bit too short. I'll just grab one of those. See how I'm already too short there. So what I'll do is use the studs everywhere I can. And these aren't super heavy springs, anything like that. So allowing the studs to help center the shafts on there, may just be these two, we'll see. That'll add some rigidity to it. See how nice and long that's sticking out there? Beautiful. Good. Good. And so our two ends are need a little bit longer operation there, but that's okay. So get my studs screwed in. I'm going to just slide all my rockers on, get those oriented, and come back to you. Here are the rockers all laid out correctly. So I told you I'm going to use studs, but for setting these up, I'm going to use the bolts, because when you're lifting the shaft off and setting it on here, all those times, if you have the studs in there, the studs stay in the engine and the bolts would actually stay in the shaft and hold the keepers here, or the hold downs. So just keeping that a cohesive unit, coming right across and dropping it in, is going to be helpful for us. My initial setup, you see how all these are kicked in. So they're close together, in and in. So I had to go through and wipe all these. I used brake cleaner and a lint-free cloth. And everything, the hold downs, the bolts, the shim spacers, the center spacers, everything's kind of coated in that goo, the shafts, and probably some kind of anti-corrosive lube of some kind. I'm not sure the proper name for it. Doesn't actually matter. What matters is we get the rockers put on and set up correctly. So 440 source wants 30 thousandths side play. And if you were to measure that 30 thousandths, they're meaning between this edge and that edge. So everything here, all the way across. So I'd usually shim mine up pretty tight. I don't want them so tight that they don't freely move. but the tighter they are, the less oil loss happens when these bearings, when the shaft is pumping these bearings full of oil. Another thing you may want to know, not, just for reference, you see that small hole there, that shoots oil into the cup. It will fill the cup up. There is no oil hole on the front side that would shoot oil onto the roller tip. So they are wanting that stuff to be splash oiled. So if that worries you at all, don't buy the 440 source rockers. So far, I haven't had any issues with the rollers or the bearings in my 406 440 source rockers. But just to show you also the offset of these rockers here, I'm just going to take it straight like that, and I'll lay it here. So you can see if it was offset the opposite direction, it would be shoving the push rod into the side of the head right there. So it's got to be there. On my Edelbrock heads, the shaft or the rocker itself, I actually had the clearance right here. This one looks like it has a good cutout. I had to clearance mine, and I didn't find out until after I built the engine. So just keep that in mind. What we're going to be aiming to do is center the roller on the tip this way, left or right. And in order to move the roller further out or in, that would require either a lash cap, which would pull it in, or a shim under the rocker shaft to move it out. But last time I checked these, they looked really good. I wiped them off. And we won't really know until everything's lashed in and spun over, because I didn't check this with a solid lifter. If I would have spun the engine over, it would have just collapsed that hydraulic lifter. Anyway, back to our setup. So if you need to pause and just see how all these go together, narrow, hold down, wide, hold down, narrow, hold down, wide, narrow, just like that. Takes this between them. And the way I typically like to start is to put one shim spacer between the rocker and the outside of the blue hold downs. So let me slide all that together, and then we'll drop it on the engine. See, it appears to be a lot of slack, but when these get bolted down, that slack's going to change. So let's take it over just a half shaft. We get these two set up, we can then do our other half. All right, we are in place. Still looking a little sloppy here. My first step, I'm gonna zoom you in here. This bolt is almost screwed all the way down. So the shoulder of the bolt is in the spacer itself, and you can still move the spacer. I'm not sure what that amount is, but to establish a baseline, I'm just going to center up the washer inside of the spacer and tighten that down right there. So I'll do that with my center bolt, and I'll do that with my outside bolt, because they're all pretty well the same on that aspect. So just kind of getting a baseline, centered them all, 1, 2, and 3. That way, when I go to set up this side, I can already know, okay, this needs to be centered here, and it'll be butted up against that one anyway. But step 1, I want to center my roller over my tip. Hopefully that camera can focus on that. But it looks like I need to slide in just about there. So how many shims extra do I need to add? I'm gonna try 2. Got 2 here. Finger back. Slide it over, move it down. And I'd say we are pretty close, maybe just barely too much. So I'll go back to 1. I'm gonna add 1 there. And it's not easy to add right now. So what I have here, I just stuck some Post-it notes to my head, wiped it with brake cleaner, stuck my Post-its. So I'm gonna put +1 here and put a S for spring. There we are. So I just wrote an S, and I'm going to write +1 because I know I need one right there. And as I move on, I'll keep that kind of centered. I want to go to this side. S for spring. How centered are we? Not that far right there. So I need at least one. And you can't just assume that because there's two over here, you need two here. Kind of some variance. Okay. So that one is looking pretty good. That's kind of a goofy looking spacer. I want to try a straighter one. And that puts my tip pretty nice here. I know you're at a bad angle. Just believe me for one time. So I'm going to, on my post-it, write also +1. So after I would do both those items, it's going to leave me a little bit of a gap here in the middle. So the easiest way of doing that, I can go ahead and put 1 and 1. And that might get me fairly close. So I got a little overzealous, and I added one here, I added one here, and I added 2 and 2. Try to skip ahead a little bit. Not really the best move. Right now I've got, you can see that rocker move just a little bit, and they're still free. I got these finger tight, but if I go ahead and put them down, just snug. That one's got movement, that one sticks, and that spins. I double checked, they want 15 to 30 thousandths. And right now, this is a 15 thousandths feeler. And I just can't get it in there. So to cure my issue, I'm going to pull one little shim spacer from right in here. And they say they're 15 thousandths. I haven't measured one this time. These are the shims that came with the kit, the very small ones. I'm going to pop one out, stick it back together, and we'll double check the lash in here. But basically, what lash we're checking, again, is from the very edge of that to the very edge of here. So don't think you need 15 and 15 and 15 and 15. Or 15 between the whole shaft. No, it's got to be between those rockers. I want to note before I pop this off, I might as well check these two. A lot of multitasking is going to happen here. You're going to be here all day long. If I'm looking at my tip, if I go all the way over, it can move just barely. So I'm going to add another shim here, just like I did there. And I do believe same thing here. I get that one tightened back and centered. I like that. There we go. Yeah. I would say for sure one right there as well. So I'll go ahead and shim those up. And what I may try to do is mimic this. So putting 2 shims, 1, 2, 1, and then 2, and I'll do 2 shims, 1, 2, and then 2. So if I give this section the same number of shims as this, it should get me fairly close between the two. And then I'll just double check both while I'm here. So I went ahead with the exact same amount of shims here. I got a nice tight 15 thousandths. It is holding that in there. I'm gonna say it's the same for this side, and you can see how they move freely, but they're not flopping in the wind, but there's no resistance. If it was tight for some reason, that would probably tell you that you don't have enough clearance. But I'll pull that gauge out of there, kind of cycle these again. See how smooth and easy that is. And our valve stem tips are still nice and in line. If anything, that one is that way just slightly, but what we need to worry about now is dropping our push rods in. I went ahead and started with number 5, doesn't matter. But they are clear, and I'll show you how I did this. I dropped my 2 push rods in. I let them go to the top of the lifter, and I just put my fingers on top of them before I had rockers on. And I used my other hand, and I turned the engine over. So as I turned the engine over, I felt both push rods until they both were down. One of them started to come back up. So intake open, exhaust closed. They were both down, so I knew I was on the back side of the cam lobe in some form or fashion. And then I put my rocker arms on. So currently, they're basically at 0 lash. And that was where I'd guessed whenever I say guessed. That was when I did precise measuring and got my push rod length earlier. So right now I've got almost 1 thread hanging out the bottom. And they have not been lashed down yet, so I'll do my lashing later. But they are free and clear. I'll show you with my flashlight. Now you can see it. Exhaust side clears by a mile. The intake was a little bit tighter on the inside wall. I know it's very hard to tell from here, but I'll do the best I can. She spins freely. And it's actually a little, it's clear. I like it. I would say there's at least 60 thousandths clearance. I know that that's kind of a popular number with a lot of people on stuff in engine building, but like I said, mile of room there. I think my exhaust holes, or the inner holes, will have plenty of space. Yeah, exhaust here as well. And the intakes may be a little bit tight, but I'll just have to check it on every one. So I can pop those push rods out and go into here, or I can check that later after I set up this whole shaft. I think I'm gonna go ahead and call it for the day. I'll show you where my stopping point is and why. These are my rockers for side number 2. And I'm out of shims. I actually broke into this Mopar Performance shim pack here that Drew gave me and used all those as well. So if you're doing this, go ahead and buy yourself 2 or 3 packs of shims. I like the Mopar ones a little bit better than the 440 Source ones. See, this one's got a little wave to it. It got bent up or something. But the Mopar Performance ones seem to be a little nicer metal. I don't know how else to say it, but if you'll remember, we take 2 shims, 1 shim, and 2 shims, so 7 per set. And I can't remember how many's in a kit from 440 Source, but basically we're going to need 28 per side, and we're out of shims. So did go ahead and bolt the intake up. It looks really nice. I bought myself some max wedge size gaskets, trimmed those up. They took just a little bit of trimming also to get the port window correct, but I left my push rods out of this side for now until I get my other side done. That way I can set my valves up, and I'm betting the next time you see this engine, it'll be on the run stand. I appreciate y'all watching, and our 508 stroker is almost there.